From around the lens, it's In a Flash, your weekly recap of photo and video news. I'm your host, David J. Murphy.
And I'm Travis Keys.
And let's just get into the news.
Let's burst shoot.
First up for us to discuss is Canon, my favorite phone video
your camera of choice.
camera company. My camera of choice. So I'm obviously biased because I own a Canon R5, but of course we talked about the Canon R3, which is sort of their new hotness that'll be coming out whenever. Yeah. And there was a patent recently that showed how their eye autofocus works. So now we're not talking about how it focuses on the eye of the subject. We're talking about how it focuses on your eye as you look through the viewfinder, and it tracks where your eye goes and focuses on that part of the actual scene. And so they used this many years ago on their Canon, I think EOS.
EOS 3.
Yeah, the EOS 3.
I have two of them.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they're on my shelf. I actually have them.
Holy cow. Yeah, so obviously that old technology wouldn't cut it for today's, technology. So they had to upgrade it. And this patent kind of goes into explaining exactly kind of how they're doing this. And I'll be honest, it's a little bit too much for me to understand. But basically what the article kind of, says is that it will depict a small image sensor that will sit to the side of the main EVF and use a dividing prism along the optical path, which would direct light into the line of sight image sensor. So basically it's kind of like a sensor off to the side, and it's meant to not interfere with your image quality of the actual EVF. What do you think of this new fancy technology, Travis? Are you excited?
I think it's no mistake that the EOS R3 is coming from the past of the EOS 3. So obviously they're throwing it back, and if it works, it's kind of cool. It didn't. It was sort of gimmicky on the first one, but it was there. It's kind of crazy. Like if I can actually pick a little focus point, like I don't know how advanced or how precise it would be, but if we're talking like I can look at someone's eye in that viewfinder and it hits it, or the nose, or it's like, but then again, there's going to be times our eyes instantly look so many different places. Is it going to hit the right thing? So I don't know how it's going to work. I mean, it's just kind of cool, but I don't know. We'll see. Right.
Yeah. I mean, they've had 30 years to refine the technology, so I'm sure they've been able to make it a little bit better. And when I'm using the R5, actually, this is kind of one of my sort of gripes about it. And maybe it's just me having to get better at the camera, but where it's like, again, I'll try to use like the eye detect or the face detect when I'm shooting a group. And it just, sometimes it's never focusing on the right area I want to focus on. So then I have to go in and change the focus setting to pinpoint focus or something like that, or move the focus point around with the thumbstick. And it's like, that's cumbersome. If the eye sensor autofocus works as well as sort of it could potentially work, that would actually be pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you were shooting maybe, sports, or, maybe like F1 Formula cars coming around the bend, and your eyes catches that car coming around, and you're shooting it at, an F8 to F16 or something like that. So, you're not that shallow a depth of field, and it works. It might be work great. It sounds really cool. But what's kind of cool is, what if you could do that after the fact? And Adobe has, as we know, a while ago, it came out with their neuro filters. Well, they just updated a couple, and how we have that portrait mode in our iPhones where we can go in and kind of change the f-stop in post to make it bokeh-licious kind of thing. Well, now Adobe has a neuro filter for that portrait mode as well. It's one of the ones they unveiled, a couple new ones, and they're always kind of doing new ones. There's some that are in beta and some that will be coming soon, like caricature and stuff like that. But have you played with the portrait one yet? Have you played with any of the neuro filters yet?
I don't have. Well, okay, no, that's not true.
You're not using Photoshop, are you?
I use Photoshop at work, but I have not played with that filter yet.
Yeah.
I do want to. I want to play with the one where you can like change your, direction where you're looking and you're smiling and stuff like that. But I have not played with that filter. But now with this new one, maybe I'll try it out. Although looking at the videos of people actually trying it out, it looks pretty janky.
Well, I get, obviously, I get a little advanced use on a lot of these, and I have be able to use the portrait one for the depth of field. And I got to say, I tested one out on a photo of a guy with really curly hair,
Yeah,
and usually that's the kryptonite for
sure.
these type of filters, because you just see the little parts where it doesn't kind of match up. It did an amazing job.
Okay.
It was creamy and beautiful, and it you can adjust the blurriness and detail, and there's lots of specific adjustments that you don't get in the like the Apple version on your phone and stuff like that. You can actually go in and kind of dial in different parameters to it. So it was actually really cool. And since it just came out, I'm sure they'll continue to tweak it. But some of these neural filters are crazy. Like you're talking about going in post, and you know, some of these pictures, like if someone wasn't smiling, you can add a smile. It's crazy. And it's getting information from other places and doing stuff. But it makes you kind of go, "Ooh." Yeah.
No, I think it's great what Adobe is doing because it's like I think the Adobe product, right, Photoshop, as it's sort of been created, sort of hit a peak in terms of what it could do or what it does needs to do for the majority of people. I'd say probably maybe 5 years ago, and not to say they haven't improved it over that time, they have. But it's interesting to see. It's kind of like, okay, we've perfected our product to this nth degree, right? Now we're gonna do fun stuff and stuff that really shapes and changes what you can do with photo manipulation. I can just see it now, maybe like 10 years down the line, Photoshop will just be like you type in a couple words and it builds a photo scene for you. Like there's nothing, even to do with it. Or, it takes your photo and it automatically analyzes everything about it and just fixes it and, does things you can't even imagine. So it's neat to see Adobe experimenting with all kinds of neat stuff and using the cloud to sort of augment work power and all that stuff. It's really limitless what you can do with it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny that you bring that up. Is there's actually a program that they're working on, and it's not Adobe, another person, and I'll try and find the article. But you type in certain words and it does create the picture
Yeah,
for you, and it's
that's
crazy.
that's
That
like
is
the
out there. Wait, you were just talking about something that
yeah.
wouldn't it be cool if, and they are doing it.
It's like the next step of like stock photography, right? Instead of you having to
Yeah,
like search through and type in keywords and hope it looks like what you want, you type in the keywords and it manufactures a photo for you just right then
yeah,
and there.
absolutely. Yeah, it's
Eh,
it's kind of crazy.
but one thing you can't manufacture by typing into a search box is camera equipment. At least Nikon can't because they're discontinuing or delaying the production of some DSLR lenses, specifically the AFS Nikkor 180 to 400 millimeter f4 DSLR lens. And, of course, this is just probably due to some, shipping shortages, COVID, whatever you want to kind of point towards, right? But it's also indicative of potentially some other issues that are coming up with either Nikon or DSLRs in general, because people are reporting, shortages of other types of, camera equipment and lenses. And it also maybe might lead to Nikon being unable to complete its Z mount line of lenses by the end of 2021. They're trying to get 30 lenses in their family. And so, what do you think? I mean, is this sort of pointing toward larger issues with Nikon, or do you think it's just a kind of blip in their system and they'll be right back, right as
Yeah,
rain?
I mean, this is kind of a hard one to judge, because everybody instantly wants to, there's been years and years of like, oh, Nikon's gonna fail. They're failing. This is not,
Right?
and they're like, oh, I predicted it. Nikon's going down.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and there may be some signs of that, but right now there truly is shortages. There truly are problems. I mean, if you look even at luxury cars right now, they're actually telling you people are starting to buy used cars and other cars because the luxury cars that used to come with all these bells and whistles, they can't get the chips and stuff to put in them. So like these
Yeah.
luxury cars aren't coming with GPS. It's
Oh
like,
my God.
so there is shortages in this world. If you look at like the RTX line of NVIDIA graphics cards that everybody's putting in processing and building these
Yeah.
great rigs and stuff like that, there you can't get them. It's like, so there are shortages. So is this a shortage, or is it something indicative, like you said, that maybe there's a change? I tend to think that this has to do with COVID and shortages right now on this part of the story. So I definitely think that is probably what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's kind of a mix of both. I think it's obviously not a great world situation and also probably not a great Nikon financial situation. So, really, the true test will be next year around this time when COVID is hopefully better mitigated around the world. And we see some of the kind of everything sort of bounce back to normal. And if Nikon does bounce back to normal, then this was just a blip caused by the world events. If not, then maybe we got a little bit more to worry about with Nikon.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. Um, and it's one of those things that if you have your gear, how do you know you've taken a good picture? That's our next story. Terrible segue, but we're going to go into it anyway. So I was sitting there the other day, and a lot of times I get messages or DMs on Instagram and stuff like that. People asking, like, I'm sure you get a bunch of questions, and then they're like, yes, I do. It's like, can I ask you something? And one asked me the other day, is like, how do you know if you've taken a good picture? And actually, someone put an article on it, on F Stoppers the other day. Is like, how do you know when you've taken a good photo?
Yeah,
Now I've watched and read the article. I think it's more of a video that was done. I think his sort of advice is like, well, if you can take a photo and it works in color and works in black and white, then you know you've taken a good photo, which I think is a terrible advice.
yeah,
That is just so not the case. And it's funny because he goes and shows this photo of this, of this beautiful kind of mountain range with a lake in it, and he goes, well, the composition of this one in black and white works better than this one. And actually, what's really changing is the light. It's it's the way the light was hitting the thing, and so his whole thing of like whether it works in black and white was just terrible advice, I think. And it was just more to make a video, and that
yeah,
this goes up and this is what we kind of think. It's like, and then I started wondering, like, how do you answer back someone like, how do you know if you've taken a good picture? Which is actually a very valid and good question. And my kind of answer was back, well, you study the greats, you study composition, you study paintings, you study this, and you go out and shoot, 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 and then it's all still subjective.
yeah,
But I mean, you have to understand the way the light hits things. You have to understand the way, that your lens, tells a different story, from compression to the type of lens. It's like every thing you choose changes the way you interpret that photo and the way it renders. So I think it's, you have to understand the tools and understand the history of photography, and and also understand yourself, and really, when you study the greats, then you create a style for yourself, and you can pay tribute to it, or branch off and do what you want to do. It's like, what do they say, is like, you have to learn all the rules before you can break them. And that's
sure.
sort of what photography is. Learn the rules and then break them.
Yeah, the YouTuber is named James Popsis, and it's kind of like, again, one of these folks where it's like they got to find something to talk about, right? So whether or not what they're saying is actually relevant or valid is up for debate. But I think it does present an interesting question with regard to what we think is good, and what we think is good usually changes over time, right? I mean, I'm sure you look back at the stuff you did in your first couple of years doing
Oh God,
photography, and you're like,
yeah.
oh my God, I thought that was garbage was good. And that's what really makes a good photo, is people giving you sort of that honest critique about your work and helping you grow as a photographer, and being able to, analyze and be subjective about what you're doing, and making sure that, the stuff you look at back then, you look at and say, oh man, I could do better. Because if the moment you say you can't do better, then you're not improving.
Yeah, and what's
Um,
kind of crazy about looking at the work and the examples he's putting up, they're not particularly good photos to start
mhm.
with.
Yeah,
So he was not using good photos, or what I would call good photos. And the type is like, if you really want to delve into what makes a good photo, that's a really good question. I mean, it's what do we have an emotional tie to? What do we have a visual tie to? What
hmm,
can compels us to search around that image and come up with our own stories, or tells a story? There's so many things that make a good photo that you can't reduce it down to and it should be color black and white, because
yeah,
like, to say that is ridiculous, because if someone really understands color, then suddenly they're shooting something that's, maybe there's 5 million things in red and one in blue, and so they understand the color. If you change that black and white, does it still work no, it's not going to work the same. It's just like, there are
right.
reasons to use both, and reducing it down to that is just kind of silliness.
Yeah, no, I think what makes a good photo, it boils down to, does it achieve what you intended to get out of taking that photograph in the first place, right? Does it portray the subject matter in the way that you want? Like, I just went this weekend, went up to Seoul, and we did some photo shoots around a palace and whatnot. And I can look at my take and determine which of the photos I shot were good and which ones were not so good, based on what I was trying to achieve from taking that photo. It's like when I'm just doing a family photo shoot, right? I'm looking for, good composition. I'm looking for, obviously, the faces and the family, to be, in focus and looking at the camera, or, maybe not looking at the camera, depending on the shot. So, again, I just apply a series of technical factors to the photo. And if it meets those technical factors, and it also kind of, you know, maybe presents and gives me a feeling of just like pride and accomplishment from doing it. And then, of course, if it reflects when I publish it online and people tend to gravitate towards the one that are good, that helps reinforce what I've sort of believed in kind of creating it. That's it. That is a good photo. So it's a mixture of what you think is good, and then also that sort of validation that comes from sharing the photos. I mean, like
Yeah.
when you publish something on Instagram, you have a ton of great stuff on there. Do you base sort of your worth and or not worth, but do you kind of like look at how the people have responded to your imagery and say, oh, that one got more likes than that one? Maybe there's something to that, or do you just kind of do you take any
It's
validation
hard
from the
not
public?
to it's hard not to gauge a certain response back to your photos, because ultimately, you know, uh, I'm using Instagram to move me as a brand. So
Right.
I have to see, well, did this product sell or did this product not sell? And it's not so much like, I'm not really looking at it as like, well, is this a good picture or not good picture? It's like, did this connect to people or did this not connect to people? Because like you said, it's really subjective. It's like, and this is such a huge topic that we can go down so many different rabbit holes. But the truth of the matter is, like, it's like, oh, what is good to someone else might be not to someone else. If you look at like the history of photography, some of the most iconic images are not technically good images. They're just captured. Like in journalism, you catch a moment or something that people connect with or that just resonates, and it may not be a good picture, like technically a good picture, but you've captured something that is so emotionally riveting or moving that it becomes an iconic image that we all imagine. Like, that's a brilliant image. Although then you take someone that has like Ansel Adams, who went out and did zone systems and studied light and waited for hours to get the right perfect lighting and stuff like that. You might go, oh well, that's a really technically beautiful, incredible picture. It really kind of there's no right or answer. Like we said, it's all subjective. It
Yeah,
has to
yeah,
connect with people.
yeah. I mean, it's a mixture of, again, like that technical stuff and also moment, right? Did you capture an emotional moment?
Yeah.
And one camera that you can utilize to capture emotional moments, although it's a bit more tricky, is a point and shoot camera. And as
Yeah.
I mentioned, I was in Seoul, and I saw few people actually using these old school dollar disposable point and shoot cameras at this place. And I was thinking, like, are they being ironic because everyone has cell phones, right? Are they being why are they shooting with a point and shoot film camera? And I saw this article on F-stoppers, and it's similar to kind of like the other article in terms of you have a commentator trying to create a video about something. But it was interesting to kind of see this popularity of point and shoot disposable cameras, or even non-disposable cameras, just regular point and shoot film cameras are sort of making a comeback. They're being seen by, or being used by influencers and whatnot. These people with blue check marks, using them online and stuff like that. And they've grown in popularity. I was thinking, like, why are people using point and shoot film cameras? You have any idea, Travis?
Yes, I mean, it's sort of like wonderful fads.
Yeah.
When people suddenly they bring back the Holga. It's like, oh, this is a terrible cheap camera, but people want to do it. It's fun. It's like people like discovering vinyl again. It's like you have hipsters that kind of want to go back, and it's usually a Contax camera that they're like, oh, you have to have this Contax camera. It's it's unbelievable, and it there's a fine line between the people that are actually just using and doing great work and those that are being hipsters and the affected. So I think there's a lot of affected people out there doing this. But I mean, a point and shoot. When I think of point and shoot, like what I would carry around, I have a Sony RX 100, and it's it's got a 24 to 70. It's a pocket camera. I can do all kinds of stuff, but it's a digital camera. It's not a film camera. I think it's nice to understand, if you really want to be a photographer, going back to the roots of photography and understanding how to use film and what it's like to shoot 36 exposures and understand light and stuff like that. It makes you a better photographer all around. But the tools that we have today, you don't have to do that. It's fun to do that, and I think it's a good knowledge bank to have that. But the point and shoots, it's getting hard to say that, because I have an iPhone 12 Max now, and the stuff I can do that on that is really kind of amazing, and
Right.
that's when I have that, do I really need to put the other ones in my pocket or play with the other ones? It's like an amazing Sony mirrorless camera, and I have my iPhone, and I'm pretty happy with those two.
Yeah. I'm so glad I grew up in an age of film and learned on film, but again with digital, I never look back on film, and I now have no nostalgia for film. But I
Yeah.
think if maybe you grew up in an era and you never used film, like you grew up in cell phones as your camera, or again digital cameras, film may have a sort of mystical aesthetic to it. It's like this physicality to it that you don't get with like a camera phone. And so I could see the draw there. And they mentioned in this article the Contacts T3, which I guess can go for upwards of $2,400. Have you ever heard of this point and shoot camera? I haven't even heard of this camera.
Yeah, like I said, yeah, I've been around a lot of people that have whipped out their contacts, and
Okay.
and it's usually those affected people
Yeah.
that really it kind of like have you ever been around people like that have a glass of wine? You have the people that really just enjoy a glass of wine with dinner, and then the people that go into it full depth. Oh, this one comes from the south of Spain. Comes from a
Yeah.
earthy terroir of minerals, and this it's fabulous. It's like there's enjoyment, and then there's just kind of fanatic, like I'm a jerk. But
Yeah.
so there's the fine line of crossing over, and I found usually the people that are that into pulling out a contact and saying it's a contact camera, and it's like people that wear two watches.
I'm just looking on Amazon for this camera, and it's $3,500 to buy it used. I'm like,
Crazy,
oh
right?
my God.
I wish I had picked up a couple and stored them so I could sell them to
Yeah,
them.
there you go. Buy the camera now that you think is going to be that camera in 20 years, and then you'll be set
That's the
for
thing, is like
retirement.
you look online and all that, and when do you get to the point where it's, what do you say, gear acquisition syndrome, where maybe you want just
Whoa,
everything
that's
from yeah, right, yeah. So
good
our next one,
transition.
our next article we're going to talk about is, do you suffer from gear acquisition syndrome? And I certainly have found myself many times doing that.
Yeah,
Suddenly going, like, oh, I need the next biggest best camera, and I think the best thing that's kind of slowed me down is a lot of these biggest and best new cameras are costing a lot of money. So I'm like, do I really need that? And it slowed my roll down a little bit. When you get a Sony A1 coming out for $6,500, it's like, you're not going to like, I've got to get that today. You're just like, no, I think my R4 is doing just fine. And
yeah.
I maybe don't need that. So I mean, where do you find yourself like always looking and wanting to get the next best thing?
I'd say up until about 5 years ago, yeah, I was probably exactly that way. I needed the new, latest, greatest, or some weird, interesting looking thing on Kickstarter. I needed to try it out. But yeah, the last couple years definitely have been me slowing down in that respect, and honestly selling a lot of my old gear, and taking that pause when I see something new, not instantly grabbing my credit card, actually
Yeah.
sleeping on it or thinking to myself, do I really need it? And 9 times out of 10, I don't.
Yeah, and one of the best things they kind of put in this article was a series of like 7 questions, and they're really kind of important. Like the first question is, do I need it? Why do I need it? What will be the
Hmm.
result? Ultimately change my photography the better. And most
Yeah.
of the times we want it just because we feel like there's been an ad push, or we think it's gonna be the missing link of why I'm not doing this, and it
Hmm.
really doesn't do anything. Like I think a lot of times maybe a lens is a lot more important than a body, if we're going to invest in stuff, because lenses really do different things.
Yeah.
What second question? Will it require me to upgrade any of my current gear, including computer? Will it? Is this need or want? That's the important one right
Right.
there. Is it need or want? More often than not, it's want. Could I use the money for photography experience with my current gear? A lot of times, you might get a lot of better stuff if you went out and did experiences in shooting than spending it on the gear. The gear that you currently have is probably great. Actually go out and take the photos, spend
Yeah.
the money on going and taking the photos instead of making the gear. So there
Yeah.
was lots of great questions there, and I think a lot of times we always feel like we need new stuff, but we don't master or utilize what we have to the best of its ability.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
think if you get to that point where it's like, I'm just not getting that shot, or I'm not getting what I need because I don't have this. It's like, if you're into birding for photography and you only have a 16 to 35, yeah, maybe you'll invest in a zoom lens or something like that. Because it has to be something that's really going to fundamentally change what you do. If it's just like,
Right.
I'm going to upgrade from an R4 to an R5, well, what are you getting, that little better autofocus? What are you actually getting that's going to make your photography that much better? That So a lot of times it's like, oh, I just want the next best thing.
Yeah. Usually it's some sort of gimmick.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I have acquired gear. You never stop acquiring gear, but I would say the gear I've been acquiring has been more functional. A lot of it has been pushing towards expanding my video capabilities,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
using the teleprompter or the audio connector tool or this microphone boom arm. It's all been gear that I've, utilized on a regular basis. And that's the third thing too. You have gas if you're buying stuff and it sits in a junk drawer, right? After you buy it, after the first or second time you use it, you play with it and you're like, as soon as you see that junk drawer getting filled, you're susceptible to gas. So yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is, another thing that helps is get a family, because once you have a family and kids and whatnot, and you have to budget, then you're not going to be blowing your stuff on worthless or
I think it's also good advice, which is don't rush into buying
yeah,
things. It's like, especially being an early adopter. You may, oh, I heard all this great stuff, and of course the stuff you hear in the first month is going to be fantastic because it's usually either paid reviews or people working for the things. Or wait, just get it. They'll give it a little time, let the dust settle, read the reviews, the real world reviews, and see, because you might look in there like, oh, no one talked about the ibis failure, or this, or different things, like, well, that's not going to suit me, right? Or this one doesn't really work in situations. Like, let the dust settle a little bit before you rush out.
And don't worry, don't negate the used market as well. Don't think you have to get
Absolutely.
everything new either. Like, one of the
Especially
things,
lenses are
yeah.
great in the used market.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of the reasons I've held off on buying any more RF glasses. I'm hoping that eventually it'll get on the used
Eventually, yeah,
market.
you have such a new camera with and those expensive glass that
Yeah.
it'll probably be a little before some of those hit the used market.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end of this week's show, unless there's anything else you have got to add there,
No,
Travis.
I think we went off some good stuff today, especially stuff that we could go further down the rabbit hole. So please, if you liked any of the subjects we talked about today, or you want to continue discussion, or let us know about some topics we maybe haven't talked about, get in touch with us. And how do people get in touch with us?
Well, they can go on our Facebook page, or they can go to YouTube or Twitter or Instagram or all the places where we live, or just go to aroundthelens.com. You can find links to all that stuff out there. And you can definitely find links to Travis's Instagram account, where you can see that he has a blue check mark. Congratulations, Travis. I'm
I
so
heard you
proud of
making fun of that earlier. I'm not one of those people that rush out with the blue check mark to buy stuff, but you know what, it's like it's a cool little thing to be verified
No.
after.
I'm proud of you, and I'm very envious and jealous, and I hope that blue check marks brings you all the joy and satisfaction in life that
I'm a complete
it
man now.
garners. Indeed, there you go. All right, well, there we go. Get that blue check mark, and we can rest easy.
I'm going
All
for the
right,
purple next. I don't know what that means, but I'm going for a
purple check mark. Oh my goodness. All right, well, that's going to bring us to the end of this week's show. Thank you so much, Travis. This has been Dave Murphy for Around the Lens in a Flash, and we are bouncing.